Welcome to our open session, Q&A open session, and you can ask any question. We're permitted to ask any question, even if it's a question you have asked before and you're still not really clear about it. You can still ask it. Number one reason being that Scrum is a learning environment, and every day we learn. So if you know something, it can be that there are definitely some changes that have been happening and maybe some new learnings, especially the fact that with the digital world, it's a very fast moving environment. So we're going to go straight into our question and answers, and purely question and answer. Please don't ask me any question which is out of technical question and answer session. So I'm going to read through the questions and I'm going to provide the answers. And if you have a follow-up question, you can ask a follow-up question based on the answer, and we're going to come back to the follow-up question. The first question I'm seeing on the chat box is in a practical situation, if the work doesn't finish within a sprint, what happens? Definitely you roll it over to the next, not to the next sprint, to the backlog. If, let's say, your team is working on 5 issues, 5 tickets, 5 stories. Remember, issue, ticket, stories, they're all the same thing. Different team might call it different way, but they all mean the same thing. So if your team was working on maybe 10 different stories, and at the end of the sprint, they were only able to complete A, what you do is that you roll it back to the backlog, and then you re-estimate it, definitely reprioritize it and re-estimate it. You might add it to the next sprint, depending on the priorities, right? But the reason you're re-estimating the work is because part of the work has been done. So you don't want to still keep the previous workload or story point that was assigned to the story. Okay. Now, the next question says, how do you ensure the effectiveness of product development processes in your team? Okay, this is kind of a big technical question because looking at the effectiveness of product development processes, it goes beyond just you facilitating, right? For instance, you might want to look at technically, how do you ensure that the developer are building quality into their product? How do you ensure that the quality they're building actually meeting the definition of done and all of that when you don't really have that technical ability? Now, this is where your observation power comes into place. Number one, when you look at the amount of technical depth, which means that once your team deploy the work they're doing to the production environment, and they might kind of shoot it back and say, oh, this bug, we need to fix this, we need to fix this. These are some of the things which you now start observing, and you can help your team to you can have a discussion with your team. Most often as a Scrum Master, you're not the one doing it. You know how to coordinate people to do it, right? So in order to help your team to be effective in the development process, number one, creating a conflict-free environment so that they can openly speak to say, okay, I was working on this code, but I find it difficult, and they can ask for help. The first thing to do is to enable them, create an environment where they can easily communicate with each other, ask for help. And also, more or less, there's some people in the team that can like really overshadow and take control of the process, right? Especially some of the lead developers that have been there for a very long time, and again, they want to comment on every developer. It might make the junior developer feel like, oh, the work is not being appreciated. So you want to kind of balance that environment, and because you're creating that balance and creating kind of a friendly environment, automatically is going to help them develop, improve the development process. Another thing you want to do is helping to coordinate dependency, dependency, and also helping to coordinate communication between the product owner, the stakeholders, and just make sure it's flowing. You don't have to be at the middle of it, but you just have to make sure that everything is working. So you're more like an observant or observatory body, if there's a word that exists like that. All right, then the next question says, in what situation are you allowed to extend the duration of a sprint? All right, the Scrum guide tells us that, okay, we cannot really extend, it needs to end and it's finished, right? But in a practical environment, they are an exception. Okay, let's say that you have been working in one team as working like maybe 2 different or 3 different teams in an organization, and then the organization now keep adding different teams, and it gets to a point where they need to get some alignment, which means that they need everybody to start and finish at the same time. If your team had like maybe 1 week below, your team might need to kind of extend the duration of the sprint in order to have alignment with the company. So that's practical. That's acceptable. That's a situation that just happened at work, and we had to take that decision as a team. Like, okay, in order to align, our team actually is joining a bigger team, which we're building independently. Now we're joining another team, which are like 8 different teams, and they've been doing the work for a very long time. So for us to be able to align into the organization demo, we need to prolong. We need now to have a 3-week, exceptional 3-week sprint instead of 2-week sprint in order to catch up. Then when we start the circles, we go back to our 2-week sprint. So practically that is acceptable. But if you've been asked in an interview, definitely, if you have not really experienced that, it's a very simple stuff that happens, right? It doesn't really happen in most of the environment, but it kind of happens also when the organization is transitioning from a Scrum environment into a safe environment. They try to get those alignment, and then everything is asked to align to the cadence of the organization, so which means that they have to prolong to catch up so that we start at the same date, finish at the same date, and everyone can have a demo on the same day. Okay, perfect. Now the next question says, what are some of the ways you have supported stakeholders as a Scrum Master? All right, supporting stakeholders is a very important thing for you to do as a Scrum Master. Now, the number one way you can support your stakeholders is that you can have like you can participate in stakeholder update meeting or stakeholder support meetings. So stakeholder support meetings, depending on the product that you're building, they may happen once every week, they may happen once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. When the increment is being deployed to the stakeholder, what is happening is that the stakeholder, while they're using it, there are issues that come up, and then they need to report that issue back to the team on how to fix that. So in the stakeholder meetings, those issues are being raised. Now, if you happen to be working in an organization where there are multiple teams, about 8 or so, that meetings, almost all the product owners, mainly it engage the product owner because of the technicality. You engage the product owner, they're there and they raise the issue. Okay, we have an issue with XYZ, and this team like, oh no, okay, my team can handle that. My team can handle that. That's kind of more of technical depth, or that kind of, it might be technical depth coming back like, we need this to be fixed. Or it might be more requests coming up like, oh, we need this extension to be added. So you as a Scrum Master, you can participate in that meeting so that you can have an understanding of the different work that is coming back, and you can be able to identify, is it about is it about the problem of view inequality? Is it coming from my team? It's coming from my team. How can I best support my team? All right. So and the next question says, do you coordinate dependency in your team, given that, okay, how do you coordinate dependency in your team, given that you are a non-technical person, right? How do you coordinate? Now, when we talk about dependency sometimes can be a bit technical. Your team can be working on a product that is dependent on the DevOps team or on the QA team if your organization is big enough to run most of those teams like independent team. then in most of the cases, they might be working on a story where you need to facilitate dependency. Now, how can you support your organization even when you're a non-technical person, you don't really understand the data? The key is in communication. That's why one of your biggest roles as Scrum Master is to communicate. Now, you meet with the different teams and you identify what are the story you're working on and which of the teams you have dependency with. And then they give you the team they have dependency with, and they might even give you the aspect, like the non-technical words you need to use to coordinate that team. And since you already identified that team, you can reach out to the Scrum Master or to the person in charge and say, okay, my team is expecting XYZ from you. How can you help us? And then when you keep that communication between the other team and what they're doing, you can be able to help support that person in that team member in coordinating that dependency. Yeah, but in most of the cases, you also want to encourage your team member in case where they can easily reach out to the person they're having a dependency with. That is really going to be good. The reason why we have cross-functional teams in an organization is to ensure that we can reduce those dependency, right? With some teams, they're going to have a QA and a tester. Normally, the QA and the tester should be an independent team, but the reason they bring them into the team is because they can limit dependency with the QA team or with the testing team, and they can also help kind of reduce a lot of external communication you need to be doing as a Scrum Master. All right, the next question says, what do you do when a stakeholder goes directly to the developer to add work to the developer tasks? Okay, now what happened in that case if a stakeholder goes directly to the developer? The first thing is that if that happened, that requires some coaching. If that's the first time that's happening, maybe the developer did not understand that they cannot add work directly. Now, this requires you to understand the process of Scrum, which means that only the PO is required to accept stuff into the backlog. Because if everyone is accepting scope of work into the backlog, there might be an urgent task that needs to be done that wasn't prioritized the right way, right? And the PO who kind of owns the backlog will not really have a bigger overview of what is there and what needs to be done and what needs to be coordinated. So the first thing is that you first of all need to coach the developer to understand that they cannot really accept work directly except they have been appropriately committed with the PO and the PO has assigned them that right to do that. So that's the first point. Now, on the second point, with the stakeholders, it might be a bit tricky. Sometimes you might not have the power to go talk to that stakeholder directly. So it is always good to link up with your product owner who is communicating with the stakeholders to help them understand the reason why they always have to run story through the product owner. So that's the way you're going to handle it. But you going directly to talk to that product owner, except you have been given that permission to collaborate, to coordinate with them. And one of the reasons you might not even be the right person to talk to that stakeholder is because it's about technical issues, right? It's not just about, oh, you should add or you should not add stories. It's about a bit of technicality, collecting the product requirement, which is the work of the product owner, so that if they're explaining why they actually did that, now the PO can be able to understand the reason why they are bringing that or the reason why they had to take that, and can better explain it to the team or better find a way on what to do not to let that happen the next time. So in summary, what's happening here is more of a communication issue. The stakeholder might not be aware that this is the process of the Agile, this is the process of Agile delivery. So which is where we come in to say, as a Scrum Master, what you do is that you can also coach the organization on Agile principle, right? So you coach an organization with Agile principle based on situations that arise. You don't kind of organize a coaching session and say, okay, this is for managers and stuff and come in. No, it's just based on your interaction, you can coach them. All right, the next question says, for PO, the PO for your Scrum team frequently turn requirements doc received from stakeholder into ticket and asks you to estimate each. How do you feel about this procedure? All right, you're not permitted to estimate stories. Why? Only those who are doing the work have the power to estimate. If the PO is doing that, the PO doesn't understand the Scrum process. So you as the Scrum Master need to be able to collaborate with the PO and help the PO know that only those who are doing the work have the power to estimate the work. And estimates are done either during backlog refinement or during planning. So you need to let them know that, okay, those are the appropriate channel where we can estimate the work, and this is how we're going to roll through the work. So that is the way you should handle that. That question was just simply actually evaluating to make sure that you understand your role as Scrum Master. Now, the next question is, what happens if the stakeholder are not happy with the product at the end of the sprint? Now, that's what happened in the sprint review, right? If they're not happy, they give you feedback, right? And you, now it's time for you to, that's why we have retrospective at the end of every sprint. If they're not happy, now you need to be able to collect their feedback, and you don't show your frustration in front of them, right? You have to protect your team. So you just say, okay, we apologize, this is happening. We're going to do everything within our reach to make sure that we solve this problem as soon as possible. Now, and that already gives you an opportunity that that's an impediment in your team. So when you go back to the retrospective, these are some of the stuff that you discuss, and you discuss on ways on how to be able to close that gap. So that is what you do. And the next question says, how will you handle a team member who leads daily Scrum, turning the event into a reporting session for themselves? All right, that's when you step into facilitate, because if you are the Scrum Master, you are the daily Scrum, you need to facilitate, right? You don't let the developer facilitate. But if you're definitely not supposed to be in all the Scrum daily stand-up, it's owned by the developer. But if you are available, you have to be there. Now, if that is happening, now it's time for you to discuss all of that at the retrospective. Number one, you can be able, if that is a developer, number one, you can be able to handle that retrospective. Number two, you can be able to pull that person behind and give them some cautioning on what the retrospective should all be about and how to approach it, right? And also, you can also just kind of throw it up only to say that, okay, team, it's going to be good that different members try to facilitate when I'm not around. And you can try to also switch it over. But you always have some of these people, some of the developers, they want to step into and give a comment on every stuff. Handling them, it's a bit technical. Number one, retrospective is one of the points you talk about them, but you can also talk about them behind the one-on-one. And if that continuously happens, what you do is that in one of the retrospective, set up a working agreement on how to keep your daily standard within 15 minutes. So when you set that up, it's going to be a ground rule, and then everyone now keep on that working agreement. So it doesn't feel like you're the one trying to push them away. We're like, okay, we all agreed on this, so we can work from this. All right, so the next question says, what is the best way to break the ice in the daily stand-up? Okay, the best way to break the ice is when the first person comes into your stand-up room, start a casual conversation with them, something non-technical. Key example, today, as a new team I'm kind of getting into, and I met the first person like, oh, how was your weekend? Did you have some time to go out and have some fun? So, oh no, it was a long week, so I just stay on the bed. Oh, what happened then? We started having a conversation. Oh, I was moving, and someone said, oh, I'm buying a house, and someone, so it kind of opened up, right? It's about relaxing the environment. So icebreaker doesn't really mean that you need to do something super funny. It just means that you don't want to just come and say, okay, team, today, so our daily stand up, I'm pulling out my Jira board. I want everyone to give their update. Now you're making the environment stand. So you relax and then pull with the communication. So that is ice breaking. Most of the Scrum Master must be present All right, you should be present, except you have another important meeting, which is like a stakeholder meeting, or which are like some of the major events. But to the best of my knowledge, most organizations do not schedule other meetings or to try as much as possible. And you are the one that owns the Scrum calendar for most of the cases. So you should be able to be there to support your developers, especially when they're a new team. It's not recommended that you be there, but it's a plus that you are the Scrum Master, you're there to support your team. And also for PO, if your PO are not attending the meeting, you want to encourage them to attend so that they can also be able to track the progress of their team and see where their team needs support. Are there so many questions coming? Are there so many technical questions coming up? If so, it's kind of a team support, and just being there, even for team members that might not have update or might be supporting other teams and they're not working on a story, you still really want to encourage them to be in the daily stand-up just to show that support for their team. How do you prevent boredom during spring retrospective? Very important. This is where you need all your icebreaker and all your jokers, right? Retrospective can be boring because most of the cases like, okay, team, can everyone say what we did well and then what we did not do well and what are the actions that's retrospective. We're done, right? So we can be done with our retrospective in less than 10 minutes. But what you want to do is that you want to be creative. You want to approach every retrospective with a different approach. Sometimes I approach my retrospective with gratitude. Like, okay, team, today let's just look at people. I just want everyone to pick someone that they've really been helpful to you as a team and just give some gratitude. And that was like a very powerful session I had. And you could see how people are, people just knowing that they're appreciative of the small, you're appreciative of the small things they do, it makes them to go extra mile. And that was really kind of one of the most impactful retro I saw. Like, oh, especially with the PO, most of the developers. So, oh, I know I always bulk you a lot of mail. I don't really mean it. Just like sometimes work really get overwhelmed, and you need to get through that. And people just reconciling and automatically doing that. Another powerful tool to make your retrospective work is using the chat box. Okay, what are we doing now? So, okay, put your question on the chat box, right? I can use this chat box to facilitate and get everyone on board talking. For instance, I can just say, okay, Nora, I see you putting in this question. Can you throw more light on this? And I said, oh, Rashia, I think it's the same question you're having. Can you? So because I'm using the chat button, now I can prompt everyone to talk. But if there's no information for me to act on, it's going to be difficult. Like if I call Rashia to talk, Rashia was like, okay, I'm still thinking and all of that. But if you drop a comment on the chat box, I can use that to kind of follow up, because she's the one that did that. She kind of feel prompt to communicate, right? So those are really important stuff to talk. You can also put in a lot of jokes. If you're someone, you should learn some jokes. If you're someone that's not funny, you need to learn some jokes, right? Also learn how to be funny some of the time, just by turning some of the situation into funny sessions. Okay, and also one of the stuff that can make your retrospective also very interesting, in the middle of the retrospective, you feel like it's getting too tense, you can talk about some personal stuff before switching back in there, right? You can just use the situation and raise up some personal stuff and maybe some fun stuff that you were doing this weekend, and then you get everyone a bit on that direction, then you pull everyone attention back in. All right, as a Scrum Master, can we suggest ideas to the stakeholders on the project? Yes, you can suggest ideas to the stakeholder on the project, but the go-to person is definitely going to be your manager. So your manager is going to be the stakeholders you talk to about suggestions about the project. You don't go directly maybe to the client and start suggesting. No, there is a protocol you should follow. And then this is also where we need to understand what are stakeholders. Stakeholders are those who are interested in the project. Most often, all your stakeholders might just be within the organization. It doesn't simply mean people that are out of the organization. Yes, we can make suggestions to the different stakeholders. Okay, now the next question says, your Scrum team is consistently failing to meet their meet focus and sprint goal, and their velocity is volatile. Okay, what are the probable reasons for this problem, and how would you address it with the team? All right, this is about not meeting the sprint goal. A couple of reasons that might be a case. Now, if I were to answer this question in an interview, the first thing I would do is I would do a disclaimer. Right, that's an interesting question, but unfortunately, my team have not really gone through that. But if this were to happen, then I switch to theory, right? Number one, you don't want to say, oh, this happened to me, so it shows that you are not a good Scrum Master, right? So you can say that while you joined the team and you went through the velocity the velocity chart, you saw like, oh, this was most of the cases, and then when you step in, you started putting in these procedures to see how you can do that. So what are some of the causes where you have inconsistency? Number one, the team is kind of picking last chunk of story pointing, which means that they're leaving the story at 8, and then maybe, I don't know, I haven't seen a team that had a story point of 13, but maybe they're leaving story point at 8, at 5, and all that stuff. So story point like that means there's quite a lot of work to be done. And if you leave it at that larger phase, there's high probability that you might miss something. So it's a good practice to help your team chop down the story point to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And in that case, it will be easier for them to visualize what they can do to accomplish that. And if it's between 1, 2, 3, and within the next 2 sprints, they've been planning that and they have not been able to complete, they can easily adjust compared to bigger story, right? So if your velocity is volatile, which means it's constantly changing, number one, you're not estimating your story, and your capacity planning is definitely weak. Or your team doesn't really, you're not estimating rightly. So what you want to do in order to address that problem, first of all, help the team to be able to make sure that they're breaking down the stories into very smaller stories or so. And then it might also not be that case. It might also be that the environment is not conducive for the team. It's kind of a burnout environment. They put in so much work, so they feel overwhelmed. When they feel overwhelmed, they cannot deliver. So you have to not just check about the story, you also have to check about the happiness of your team, which also bring in the question you might be asked, like, what can you, apart from matrices, what are some of the ways you evaluate the performance of your team? Collaboration and happiness. If your team is a happy team, they're collaborating, that's an indication of a good performing team, right? There's no fight back and all of that. Yeah. So like the different things which we talk about, the five stages of a performing team. When a team is being formed, what happened? It switched to storming, right? Just imagine I bring 10 people from different backgrounds and put them together. And then I ask them to say, to tell me what is the right way to maybe pronounce a word. And they're from different stuff. Now, that's a whole lot of chaos, right? Now, it's, let's say, we call them to pronounce water. I pronounce water, someone will pronounce water, someone will pronounce like, okay, we're trying to find which one is the right pronunciation. And someone might feel like there is the most correct. But if we do that like for a couple of 2 days, we don't understand that, okay, each person has different value. And we start now normalizing, right? So the first phase, you form a team. The second phase, is storming, there's fighting. The third phase, there's normalizing. And now when we understand ourselves now, what happened? We can now collaborate together, performing. When we can collaborate together and we become a good team, what happened? We can take one person from that team to go help another team. That's adjoining. So those are the 5 stages of a performing team. All right. Now the next question says that, what question can they ask regarding Salesforce as a Scrum Master? Salesforce is a CRM which is out of the Scrum field. So if you have used Salesforce before, now you can say, yes, you have used Salesforce before. If you have not used Salesforce, Salesforce is not part of the Scrum Guide. It has nothing to do with Scrum Master. It's just like you can be going in a bank environment and they're asking you if you have used maybe another tool that they normally use in client acquisition in the banking environment. So yeah, if you see here in the job description, YouTube, it takes you just about a couple of 6 hours to learn anything you want to learn. You can go learn that and tell them some story about that. That's just what they need. They need you to have an idea about it. So if you feel like, oh, you really need it, you can invest some time, go to YouTube, learn that, and get the answer. What qualitative agile metrics will you consider tracking? I think we just answered that question, right? Team happiness, and then collaboration and communication. How would you prepare to kick off a transition to Scrum? Okay, now this is a hard one. And sometimes a lot of people say that, oh, I transition my team from waterfall to Agile. It's not just like a day meeting or so. Agile transition starts from the leadership. Just imagine one of the biggest problems many Scrum teams are facing, and the Scrum Master is still more like project manager or still having a lot of input from the administration. It's because the administration is still purely waterfall. They don't really understand why the team should be flexible, right? Why the team should already own their ceremony and do things without taking permission from them. So kick startup is first of all, you need to start with the leadership, making sure the organization is buying the idea and they're willing to support the team. Now, if they're willing to support the team, now if you're in a safe environment, there's a course called Leading Safe. That is a course for leaders. They need to go through that course, understand what it is about that the team is implementing. If they don't understand it, you have a lot of wrong input from the administration, and then your agile journey is not going to go well. Now, if they understand the management or the leadership understand that, now that is where you now start identifying teams that can self-organize. Now they can self-organize based on a product line. So you identify what we call a value stream. Now the entire company cannot transition to Scrum or Agile. They start with one product. Maybe they are delivering, or they must start with one client. We want to start serving this client with a Scrum framework. And then you build a cross-functional team. The best way to build cross-functional team is to identify those who can be there and let them organize themselves, right? Like, so you can start with someone from the development team, and they choose like, okay, 4 of them pick themselves, and they bring in someone from the QA team, and that's how they self-organize themselves. And then you come in as an agile coach or as a Scrum Master to start helping them understand what Scrum is all about. And then start helping them to run the ceremony one step at a time. So you gradually are building what? You're building the mindset. Scrum is the mindset. You're building the mindset. While you're building the mindset, now the next phase is to inspect and adapt. Sometimes you might not really want to pour everything at once. You say, you know what, we need to start with the planning, daily stand-up, review, retrospective. Everything needs to be in full force, right? You need to kind of flow with the team, do a gradual shift, and start helping them to understand why why we need to do this and how is it going to contribute to our goal. When they start seeing the business value of what we're delivering, it's going to help them. But if you just come and say, okay, let's create agile teams without really focusing on business value, you just want to create teams, no one is going to see the importance of it, right? And importance comes in when we can relate it to value. And in most of the companies, it's going to be the business value. And that is also going to be your entrance to communicate or to resolve any situational issue when it comes to management giving you trouble, team member giving you trouble. The common interest is the business goal that you use that in order to effectively communicate. All right, what do you recommend a newly formed team work on first? We need to have kind of a working agreement. on what are some of the ground rules. That's what's going to help the team. So it should not be like you are the Scrum Master telling them what to do. We should generally agree on some of the working agreement. When we talk about a working agreement, it could be, okay, we're all committed to show up on our daily stand up on time. We're all committed to respect each other opinion. We are committed to make sure that we don't interrupt others when they're sharing their opinion. We're all committed to make sure that we participate. We're all committed to make sure that we're respecting the agenda and all of that. So just ground rules that is going to help them start understanding how collaborating in a team actually works. Because if you are just forming the team, it means before it wasn't a team, it was more like different people working together. So coming together, there need to be some ground rules or some working agreement. All right. Okay, as another question here, what's the difference between scope creep and unplanned work? Okay, unplanned work simply means it wasn't planned, right? It wasn't planned, then it just kind of surfaced in the middle of the sprint, and which is something that really cause affect your velocity or cause you not to finish work. When we talk about scope creep, it's like we're going out of what we planned. We estimated to do this, but then we're going out of that scope. And what is the reason why we're going out of that scope? We might be going out of the scope if we don't have appropriate communication between the team and the stakeholder, right? If we're not collecting the requirement like fully. So then we plan that this is what we're supposed to do, and the stakeholder comes and says, oh, you left us something very important. We need to add this. Right now, although we had something we're working on, now we're going out of our scope. Okay, scope creep doesn't really mean that what we're doing is not important. It's just an addition that we did not consider while we're standing. Why unplanned work simply might just be like, okay, we did not plan to handle this during this sprint, but for some reason, it is coming into the space. So I hope that it's clarified. Now, the next question, what do you recommend a uniform team to work on? Okay, answer that question. How can you as a Scrum Master identify where you need to improve? All right, very important question. Sometimes we talk about our team, and we are not focusing on where we need to improve as Scrum Master. One of the areas I encourage a lot of Scrum Masters to improve is to improve on their technical know-how. Although we're more engaged in the non-technical aspect, for you to really kind of start climbing the rank, right? Like getting into the registration engineer, the enterprise coach, agile coach, it requires you to understand some of the technical environment, like when we say the production environment, DevOps, and other stuff. So self-study is very, very important. Also taking some time to study some of the basic on AWS and understand that it's going to help you even have that knowledge to start contributing to some of the conversation. You're not too blank, right? So within your next 2-3 years in an agile environment, you should comfortably be talking about some of the technical stuff. You're not that tough, but the reason you're in that space is to learn. So you should really work on that. And now you should also work on your leadership ability or capability, learning on how new ways to do things, taking independent leadership courses that can help you. Most importantly, I think most Scrum Master also need to take public speaking courses. Remember, you're the one facilitating, you're talking to this, and you expect to grow in your journey. There will probably be a time you'll be coordinating the entire organization. So there's a way to talk that you can impact, right? It's not that you know what to say. Sometimes how to say what you know is also very important, the way you bring it out. So those are some of the things that encourage Scrum Master should start improving, can invest in themselves. All right, so, okay, now how can you identify that? You identify that simply by knowing and accepting, number one, accepting that you need more. That's the first thing. Sometimes we don't accept that, oh, you know what, I don't really need much, all I need is just this. And because you're not acknowledging that you need more help, you cannot go for more help. So that's very important. So when you identify that you need more help, you'll be able now to see which area you really want to go in. What anti-pattern do you know of that can happen during a spring retrospective? Okay, there are many anti-patterns that can happen during a spring retrospective. If during the spring retrospective, we're discussing technical issues that happen during the spring, that's an anti-pattern. The retrospective is not for us to discuss technical issues. It's not for us to discuss stories. It's not for us to discuss, it's for us to look at overall performance. It's for us to look at how well can we do. So if we're using our retrospective to discuss more of technicality and the way, now we can talk about how something went wrong. But if we start focusing on what techniques should we use next time and all of that, and start going into those detailed technicality, it's an anti-pattern. If we identify that the technical system was an issue, what we want to identify is how to improve it, and then put that as an action item rather than using that retrospective to address the technical item. Now, an anti-pattern also in a retrospective can still be that we are focusing a lot on what else we need to do rather than appreciating the team, really using that moment to make your team feel special, even if they fail. So if the goal is for you to kind of push forward on the other side, then it can still be an anti-pattern. Yes, Rasha.
Can we say waste of time is an anti-pattern?
Yes, not respecting the time box is an anti-pattern. And also as allowing some people to overshadow the voices of others is an anti-pattern.